The University of Fort Hare, celebrating 100 years today, it was known for being more radically inclusive and produce sub-Saharan's most influential leaders. Now we are joined from our Cape Town studio by Sipho Pityana, Fort Hare's former registrar and currently the Anglo Gold Ashanti's chairman. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Morning. Thank you very much.
Now, looking back, what was the institution's mandate to you back then when you joined?
Well, remember that we were at the university as the first black leadership, and therefore expectations were that we will drive the transformation of the university after having been an independent university when it started as a college of the University of South Africa. And during 1948, when apartheid came in, it became marginalized as part of the Bantu Education Project. So we were charged with the responsibility to navigate it out of a narrative that was about apartheid and marginalization and all of that to asserting a new transformed university that will form part of a post-apartheid agenda.
Was that a tough challenge to do?
It was a tough challenge, and I hear a lot of romanticization of the institution and celebration of the leaders it produced and all of that. But I think that a more important focus of the conversation around Fort Hare is how a dream of a university that really becomes an articulation of an African agenda has been sidelined and marginalized, largely because it hasn't been embraced as part of a broader public policy on higher education. Now Fort Hare, for all intents and purposes, is a home of the African underclass, if you like. So if you can't make your way to any of the major higher educational institutions, then you find your way to institutions like Fort Hare because they are under-resourced, they are marginalized. The transformation agenda that we initiated we have not been able to pursue because those things need resources.
Mm-hmm. Now, how is it and how come the university, as you put it, become the university for the underclass? Is it just because of shortage of funds? Well,
let's look at what we tried to do when we were there. We had to make sure that we live up to its legacy of being a Pan-African institution. So one of the things that we had to do was to recruit African academia from the diaspora to make sure that Fort Hare in its academic composition is made up of Africans from different parts of the continent and also from other parts of the world, so that they begin to tamper with the curriculum, the approach of delivery of lectures, the research agenda and all of that, indeed to decolonize, if you like, the education and curriculum of the institution. And in large measure, we succeeded in doing that because we managed to attract a great deal of donor funding. But once South Africa became free, there was an assumption that that agenda would be embraced by government and that government would provide kind of funding that we saw being provided to the likes of Stellenbosch, University of Free State, Rao University and others. And of course, that was never to be. The other aspect is that we had to broaden, in terms of our admissions policy, we had to address the issue of access. So indeed, part of the agenda was to make sure that students from poor communities found a home at the University of Fort Hare, but indeed to make sure that the university in its composition would be quite diverse and multi-class, but largely Pan-Africanist in its perspective, and that has happened in some measure. And also, you will see that there's a great deal of students from Zimbabwe, places like Zimbabwe and other neighboring countries. But the idea was always to broaden the student intake to ensure that the student and academic makeup of the university reflects what we were about.
Embracing the Pan-African agenda, is that perhaps the hamstring of the institution, you think?
Well, part of decolonization of higher education, if you like, is about that, is about being unashamed about who we are, where we are, and what we seek to be. We are Africans. We are an higher educational institution in Africa. South Africa is part of the African continent. We have produced African leaders who pursued the agenda for African liberation. And it would be anomalous for an institution like the University of Fort Hare to not reflect that in the way in which it delivers its academic programs. The research program and priorities that it articulates should reflect what we understand to be the needs of the African continent, to lift it from where it is to be one of the leading economies, one of the leading places for literature and culture, etc., in the world, and celebrated for those things. And scholarship plays a very important part in doing that. Mm-hmm. Now, to be able to achieve those things, you need resources. And the University of Fort Hare has great ideas, fantastic ideas, but it can't be driven on the back of a fundraising agenda from donors. Government has to put money where its mouth is and provide significant resources behind that agenda. And that's exactly what has not happened. Mm-hmm.
Just briefly, Mr. Pityana, what do you think needs to happen in order to inspire young minds to make sure that Fort Hare's legacy is kept alive?
I think that we need to pursue that agenda. It's all very well for us to look at the list of its alumni and see how and what they represent. The agenda and the programs of the university have got to speak to that. To the extent that they don't, it is a betrayal of that dream. Indeed, one of the reasons why the University of Fort Hare was established by missionaries, by the way, was to exactly confront the notion that black people were destined for the margins of society and have to be thrust at the center of transformation, not only of South Africa, but of the world. And we now have people who played that role because they understood that mission. So the extent to which Fort Hare is able to play that role and be a significant Pan-African institution, and indeed an internationally celebrated center of excellence in academia, it requires resources. So young people have to claim that space, but they also have to be protective of the gains that have been made in the past. I understand in a lot of instances why the frustration often boils over into anger and venting out that often comes in unacceptable levels of violence. We have to preserve the little that Fort Hare has worked hard to build over the years, and we have to seek resources wherever we are. The young alumni that has since joined corporates and government and all of that have to loyally contribute to ensure that university is developed.
Mr. Pityana, thank you so much for your time.